Hello everyone, thanks for joining me again. I think it feels like ages since I last made a video. A lot has been happening in my life. I've moved countries, so as a result sold my home, gave away my possessions and moved to a new country, and I've had to just get settled here and find a new job, which I've done, and it's great. And now it's Saturday and it's a beautiful sunny day outside, so I've got really good light for filming. My studio is not quite as I wanted just yet, but nevertheless, let's persevere. So I've been working on something which I call an UFO, and I'm sure that when I explain it, you're going to know what it is. It's an unfinished object. Many of us have these projects that we've started somewhere in the past, and they sit in our cupboards and often don't get finished. But this one was just one of those things that just grabbed my heart and attention, and I started it a long time ago, over 20 years ago, and during a very difficult time in my life, I had to put it aside and not be able to work on it. But in my heart, I've always wanted to finish that project because it was just something that spoke to me. So I'm going to share that journey with you. But before I begin that, I just need to explain what I'm going to be making. So we're going to be making some quirky, almost sort of French-like dolls using paper clay, and I'm calling these paper mache dolls. So you'll see that they're very rustic in their finish. The limbs and things that we're going to be making are very simple, and I think that most people will be able to manage to actually do this. I'm going to break the videos up into several different sections. So today I'm going to show you how to actually make the limbs, and in the next video I will show you how to assemble the body. And then I think I've got about 19 or 20 of these little dolls, limbs and faces made up, and I'm going to be dressing those, and I'll do some slow stitching with that, and I will share each of those projects with you. And the reason why I felt it would be nice to do them as separate videos is because I know how awful it is when you just want to get to the next section and you're having to skip through a long video just to get there. So I thought by breaking it up, you can choose which section you want, and we'll continue from there. So each little doll has a very simple head. It has two arms, and they don't always have to be the same shape. It has a cloth body, and it has two legs, and you can see that these legs are really easy to make because they're just straight. Basically, you could make them with feet. Some of the dolls I have made with feet, but just to show you that this is suitable for everybody, this one has no feet, as in a shaped foot. And to begin with, what we're going to need to have is either paper mache, which you can make at home, or you could use some air drying clay. And the reason why I'm demonstrating with the air drying clay is because I feel that if you're not able to make the paper mache pulp yourself, this is readily available and it's very easy to work with. However, if you do want to make the paper mache pulp, then you just simply soak some paper in water, blitz it up in your blender, strain off the excess water and mix in some craft glue or some PVA glue, and there you've got quite a nice mixture to work with. So the paper clay is going to be the main ingredient for making the legs and the arms and the head. And then we're going to need some straws. Now, when I made my dolls all those years ago, we didn't have these cardboard straws. So I went in search of plastic straws, and of course today, being eco-friendly, we can only get these biodegradable straws, but I actually think that they are easier to work with, and I think that for the purposes of what we're making, that they're going to be a nicer way to work. So for the legs, you need to cut 2 strips of these straws, 12 centimeters in length. And you'll see that they've got a hollow inside, and I'm going to explain to you why that is important once I start working. Then for the arms, they're just 1 centimeter short, 2 strips, 11 centimeters long. And then for the head and for the neck, you're going to have a strip which is 7 centimeters long. So you've got 5 pieces in all. I have here just the inside tube from an old fax paper roll, and I'm sure probably most of you don't even know what faxes are anymore, but it's just a plastic tube. If you can't find a plastic tube and you have something like a glass bottle, that has you've taken the label off that's going to work just as well. This is just to help with rolling out the clay. If necessary, we might not actually need it. So I've actually already just opened my packet, and I'm going to take out some of my paper mache or my paper clay. This, once you've opened it, if you store it, wrap it up nice and tightly. It has got foil on the inside, and that will actually keep really well. I do tend to wrap it up in its plastic container, in its foil container, sorry, and then just cover that with cling film. So I'm going to start off with the head, and to begin with, I'm just simply going to take my blob of my paper clay and roll it into a ball as best as you can. It doesn't have to be incredibly smooth, because you can always smooth this out with a little bit of sandpaper later on, but you do want to get rid of all these little cracks and things. You don't want to have too much of that. Right, so I've got a rough ball shape here. Now I'm going to take my straw and I'm going to insert it. And one of the reasons why it's nice to have this hollow in the straw is that when we come to assemble the doll and we need to stitch the limbs to the body, you'll be able to push a needle through this, and you won't have a very, very thick piece of clay that you're trying to actually push your needle through, which can be a bit hard on the hands. Now that I actually have my basic shape of my head, I'm going to take another piece of my clay, and for this I'm going to just use my little improvised rolling pin just to get it fairly smooth and even. I'm going to use this to build up the neck, but I don't want to have a really, really thick neck. So I don't want to have to push through too much of this clay in the assembling of the doll. So I'm just going to roll this fairly thinly. The beauty of the paper clay is that it's actually a combination of clay itself and paper pulp. So it has quite a nice texture and formula, but it does actually dry relatively quickly. So if you live in a country where it's really, really hot, don't take out too much at a time, otherwise you're going to find it's problematic. All right, so I'm just going to make sure that it's roughly encased. Pinch off what I don't need. And I'm just working on here on just a piece of non-stick greaseproof paper or baking sheet. And then I'm going to use my fingers just to gently smooth this all together. I am going to enlarge my head a little bit and give it a bit more shape. And that will help with the joining up of the clay onto the actual neck part. You'll notice here that I'm leaving a little bit of this uncovered, and that's simply because that's going to be inside the body, so it's just be a waste to cover that all up. At this point, while the clay is still moist, don't use any water. If the clay starts to get a little bit dry, then you will want to be able to just dip your fingers in a little bit of water, but really not much more than that, because otherwise it's just going to turn to a bit of a muddy mess, for want of a better description. So just use your fingers now just to simply smooth this, to enlarge your head. And at this point, if you're wanting to, and you feel you're artistically inclined and you want to actually add some sculptural features to the face, like a nose and that, you're very welcome. But for most of my dolls, I've just actually kept the faces very simple, almost an oval shape, not quite perfect. And if you look at this one, you'll see that the surface is not that smooth either. And yet it adds to the charm of the actual doll. So I'm just working little bits of extra clay till I feel that I've got the shape that I want. And I must say, working with this clay is very, very therapeutic. It's really, really easy to roll, and as you can see here, as I'm blending the two pieces together, that it actually smooths over quite quickly. Right, so I'm just going to smooth in these last few edges here. Just use my finger. Don't worry about any little bits that fall off. You can actually gather them up in a moment. But you do, if you have added on to your clay, you do want to blend the pieces together so that they bond and they don't peel off at a later stage. This clay object now that we're making is going to take, because it's quite thick on the head, it's probably going to take 24 hours to dry, which is fine. You can just leave it somewhere in a cool, dry place just to dry out on its own. If you're in a very hot climate, I would be inclined to just lightly lay a bit of cling film over it. Don't seal it tightly, but you don't want the outside drying so quickly and the inside still being very cool. That's never good when you're working with clay. So maybe just cover it with cling film, but don't wrap the cling film over the edge so that the air can't get in and it can't dry out at all. Right, so you're getting the idea now of how you would just smooth it. I'm now just using my dry fingers, using the back of them just to round it off a little bit more. And then you can roll it again in your hands as you wish. Right, once you've got your head more or less together like this, you can set it aside and then start on the limbs. And the process for the limbs will be very, very similar, except we're just working on the actual tube part itself. So they're long, straight little pieces. And let me just clear up any debris that you've got here, because that will easily make a problem by making lumps on your surface. So again, with the legs, we want to make sure that we actually have a nice thin coating to your little stick here. And if you were just simply to take a lump of clay like this and wrap it around, you would find that it would be very uneven. So I'm going to now just break this piece into two. And I'm going to use my rolling pin just to try and get some kind of even feel to this, so that I don't have one side of the leg thicker and the other side thinner, bearing in mind that ultimately you're wanting to get a needle through here. So if you have a look on these ones, and I've left the ones open here so you can see, I've needed to push a needle through from this side through to this side and those two opposite sides. So I've actually got 4 holes which allow me to stitch this. And if this was solid clay, or if it's very thick like this, it can be a bit tricky to push it through. So you are ideally looking for a slightly thinner layer of clay. Okay, hence the roller. We're just getting this more or less even. And those of you that have done any kind of clay work ever will know that this rolling out of clay makes life so much easier when you're trying to get a smooth finish. Then you just simply take your straw, place it in the middle, and then start to wrap your air drying clay around it. Press down onto the straw as you go, just to make sure that it is connecting, and by doing so you make it ever so slightly thinner, which is fine. And then I haven't brought a knife with me, that's what I meant to put on my table, so I'm just going to use my scissors just to snip away that excess and smooth the clay over here. And then I can push up anything that is a little bit thicker. So once I've got it roughly joined like that, I'm now going to use my fingers just to again roll this on the surface. And that's the beauty of having a solid shape like a straw on the inside, is that you can actually roll this easily. Okay, so you're going to continue along this vein, just all the time making sure that you are pressing your clay nice and firmly onto your straw base. Then roll it out, smooth off the ends nicely so that you have a nice texture. And then you're going to set this aside. So I need to have for this 2 legs, 2 arms, and a head with a neck. And I'm just going to get them all smooth like that. Pinch the ends in so that I can create my foot. And I'm going to set them aside as I complete them. I hope you've been able to follow that. Bye for now. So you might have seen that as I was trying to roll out the clay and get it to attach to the wooden straws, I was battling a little bit. And I think I've come up with a solution, which is why I'm adding this on without editing that end bit of the video so that you can see. What I was finding was that because the cardboard or the paper straw was dry and didn't have that kind of stickiness that a plastic straw would have when it comes into contact with something that's slightly moist, the actual clay wasn't sticking that well to the straw, and it was kind of like flopping around a little bit. and I wasn't happy that the limbs were looking a little bit thick. So what I did with my next section was just did a stop the video and did a little experiment, and I think that I have come up with a solution that would make it so much easier. One thing that I've learned through all my teaching experience is that when we have problems, there's normally a solution, a very easy one. Sometimes we have to step away and look at things for a day or two or three or four, and other times you've just got to put on your thinking cap and think, how am I going to solve this? And sometimes the problems actually work out to have a better result. So what I found was that because this surface was very dry against this, it wasn't sticking, and that as I was rolling the clay, it was starting to bulge out. So I've taken some fabric glue, which I had, and I have just put a little bit here. This would work with a PVA glue, anything that's not too thick. But what the idea is that it's just going to make it a wetter surface, so that it's going to stick nicely to my clay. And I have done this one slightly differently to the others. So what I've done now is I've placed my cardboard tube on there, and I have rolled my clay over that till the two pieces join together like that. And then what I did was I took my scissors and I cut fairly close to the straw to trim away the excess of this paper clay. And then you can see that they are still pretty much joined there. And because I then had the moisture on the inside of my cardboard tube where the clay was joining, this was a much, much easier exercise. So now that it's actually sticking to the cardboard tube, I'm able to then just to roll this on my surface, which will give you quite a nice smooth finish. And then, oh, there's the other one. I was just looking for the one leg that I had already made so that I can show you. You want to try and get the legs fairly similar. They don't have to be exactly the same, but they're fairly similar. So with this one, you can see I got a much, much smoother finish here. And I then just kind of tapered the edge off to make almost as if they were a little ballet shoe of some sort. And I will do the same here now with that one. You can see that I've got two little limbs that are slightly pointed. Just going to smooth this little bit out here, and that will work nicely. Now, interestingly enough, I didn't hit this problem when I was doing the head, because I had the ball with the clay right up into the middle of the head. So that's actually fine, but it was just with the limbs. So I'm now going to repeat this process and do it for both of my arms. And I'm not sure if this is going to be long enough, but let me, oh no, it won't be long enough. I'm just going to roll this together to make a new ball. So just let's refresh the measurements that we've got. For the arms, you're going to need 2 pieces of straw cut to 11 centimeters in length. And the legs, you're going to need 12 centimeter long pieces of straw to make the legs. And then for the head, where you're going to have this piece